Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Frenemies, the podcast where growth meets reality. Today, I'm joined by Jillian Als, CMO of Leadfeeder. Jillian, I think it's the third time you're on the podcast. So you're a returning guest. And of course, I'm super excited to speak to you today about all things intent data, European expansion, rebrand. We have lots to get into. Hi, Jillian.
Hi, Julia. Thanks so much for having me a third time, although it has been a while. So I feel like it's almost a reunion tour.
Yes, very fair point. Almost a reunion, but the wait has been worth it. So Leadfeeder, obviously a super interesting product. You basically show sales and marketing teams who is in the pipeline, who is raising their hands without they actually having raised their hands. And you just published an European AI adoption study, where it shows that Denmark is leading the pack. Obviously, great news for us, both Copenhagen-based professionals. But from a commercial perspective, what does that actually mean with Denmark being number one in AI adoption and so many enterprise companies adopting AI?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously means different things for the individual companies. For us at Leadfeeder, it means that Denmark and the Nordics in general are a core part of our ICP. And it means that they're ready to use our product in new ways, right? So we launched an MCP at the end of last week and boom, like tons of usage right away because there are just, more advanced AI users ready to adapt and use products in a fundamentally different way than you're used to with a traditional AI UI, if you will. And so we're kind of entering this new dawn of like, how do we continue to make our product both, AI friendly, but also we still support plenty of people who aren't on the AI train, so to speak. But I think, on a more conceptual level for Denmark, like I get it. I mean, Denmark's a very innovative country. It's always been at the forefront of technology. It's, yes, it does have farming and more agriculture, but for the most part, we're known for the intellectual economy, if you will, here. And so it doesn't surprise me that Denmark came out on top. Although I don't know that I'm the one that's making the statistic.
But staying with Denmark, and of course also on a commercial level, when it comes to the buyers, and that's something I've been hearing both in the conversations I'm having on Frenemies, but also the conversations at events and so on happening in Denmark currently. I mean, with AI, buyers are obviously becoming more equipped. Does that also mean, and is that also what you see, that they are becoming more ready to buy?
Yeah, I think we've talked about the dark funnel for ages. Well, at least in my world of B2B SaaS, right? I think it gets even darker in the world of AI and people working in through LLMs. And yes, there are even people that are purchasing and purveying software without ever having talked to anyone at sale, at a company, or even maybe potentially have visited their website. Now, I think that's an extreme. And I caution that a lot because in this conversation, we hear the website is dead, it just becomes a data feed for LLMs. I don't think that's the case in B2B because we are still humans. We need to know who we're buying. Actually, my head of web and creative just published a LinkedIn post where she did this analysis that I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was significant of people that visited our About Us page before making a purchase. So I think it just goes to show that, yes, things are accelerating in the buyer journey in the dark, but at the same time, they're still trying to buy from real companies with real history that are not just, I don't know, the latest and greatest in AI, so to speak, potentially. But I do see the shift. And I think somewhere like Denmark, it's going to be faster than other countries. And like I just said, we need as a company to be ready for that.
Yeah, I mean, all companies need to, and that's an interesting part looking at it on a European level, because what your study, of course, also points out how tremendous the differences are. So there is a few countries leading the pack, and the Baltics, Lithuania being right up there and being huge in adoption, which I also think is similar to Denmark in a way. I mean, there's lots of unicorns and innovation coming out of Lithuania, so that certainly makes sense. Simultaneously, a massive country like Germany, and of course where my roots are. So I wasn't surprised about the outcome of the study either. Is fairly down on the list, right, and slow in adopting AI. How do you, on a go-to-market level, manage that as a company growing, expanding in Europe, and prioritizing these different markets?
Yeah, no, it's a super good question. And I don't pretend to have the perfect answer because when you look at it, yes, Denmark, Lithuania, all great small economies. There's not a lot of scale there. stock is the biggest kind of economy, or I think it's maybe second to the UK, right? So, and we want to be a product for the average marketer. Like I want to be able to sell to someone who hasn't maybe even been allowed to do a ton of AI. Like you know, talk to a lot of people that are just, completely and, unable to implement AI because of regulation or fear of regulation, that companies just, rather than figure out how to use it, they just completely block it or, limit it in some way. So I think from a go to market perspective, it's hard to say like, "Well, let's just slap AI all over the website because that can detract potential buyers as much as it could, motivate more advanced marketers, so to speak." So it's a balance that we're trying to figure out. And of course, anything you can use landing pages for different languages. Our German website, is in German content and it speaks to, the buyer there. In English, it's, a little bit more potentially advanced in terms of what we're able to do with AI. But it all comes down to still having, we're still compliant, we're still ISO certified, we're still all these things to help kind of ease any potential fear around the use of AI. But like I said, it also meant from like a product perspective, we have to be ready for multiple entry points and really want to continue to develop on that front so that if someone wants to purchase our software through Claude, that they can. But it's not the overwhelming majority, say it so far. So we need to build towards that, but it's not going to be what's like driving the revenue this year.
Yeah. And I guess that's also the interesting mitigation there. As you say, like one of the biggest economies in Europe is far behind on AI adoption, while simultaneously passing or creating the path for the countries that are there already, but also for what's to come in Germany. I mean, just on the trends from other smaller economies, certainly Germany will get there eventually as well, right?
They typically do, and they do it in a in a big way, but it takes a long time, right? I think even when I speak to my German colleagues, they're just shaking their heads, right? It's all about bureaucracy and like just trying to overcomplicate it versus anything else. But it doesn't change the reality working with the market. So it is a balance.
Yeah. I mean, there you already brought up a wonderful point on like, growth meeting reality. I mean, I guess the DACH markets, there's a very clear gap you're experiencing right now at Leadfeeder, and with the specific angle on AI adoption, that there is such a massive gap between what actually should happen and will happen, but how reality in the DACH market in specific plays out currently.
Yeah, I mean, growth is such a big concept, but we also just found like in Germany, even though we're trying to be more and more product-led growth, so PLG, they want the demo. So
Yeah.
we got to give them what they want in order to, it's still such a trust-based economy and society that the demo actually is important. So it's about making those unit economics continue to work when you still need a sales assist in that market. But again, speaking of unit economics, like there's a lot of opportunity in the market there. So it is something that we're accommodating and have re-engineered all of our flows on the German website to make sure that they know that the demo is still an option.
Yeah. And I mean, the German market is, of course, also very interesting for Leadfeeder because this is kind of your home country, right? So, talking about the rebrand, you just went through a massive rebrand as Leadfeeder, and how has the rebrand shifted your go to market approach when it comes to localization?
Yeah. Well, to just maybe the listener that doesn't know the history, just 30 seconds really quick on that. Yes, our roots are German and Finnish. It was a result of a company called EchoBot based out of Germany with Leadfeeder based out of Finland, merged, created a company called Dealfront. Fast forward 3 years and we rebrand again to Leadfeeder. And there are multiple decisions behind this. It does impact the markets that we look at to a certain degree, mostly because this rebrand was more than just changing the colors and the logo and the name. This was about being really intentional about who we are for, what our main use cases that we solve for are, the narrative that we want to portray, getting rid of multiple brands that was just kind of competing with each other and showing diminishing returns. So it was very intentional on a lot of different fronts. And in some ways, it opens up our ability to be stronger in other markets again, like the US, for example. The US is just another conundrum to figure out in terms of like economies of scale and how to use your advertising dollars best there. So it doesn't mean that Germany got less important. It just meant that we needed to be really intentional about how we continue to focus on localization there. Like I mentioned, a couple of examples of things that we've tried to do to make sure that we're still geared towards the German market, even though we rebranded to a brand that wasn't necessarily the strongest there. However, I've heard great feedback from being in events and customers in Germany. They know the Leadfeeder brand. So it wasn't as bad as maybe we feared for the DACH market, but we're still finding some learnings. And we took a little bit of a hit on an SEO perspective because the Leadfeeder domain had never been in German before. So we're working on building that back up.
Yeah. But as you just talked about, it actually went smoother on a lot of ends than you might have thought. So, as a CMO, just having led this big rebrand and in that kind of also a relaunch, how did you align teams internally to ensure a smooth execution?
Well, it starts at the top as always, right? So making this decision, I was not the CMO that came in and like kicked down the door and said, we're renaming the company. I'm doing a new website. Like that was not how this decision came to be. This was a group effort. Of course, I came in and said, we have a problem here. We have a bit of an identity crisis we need to solve. And so then we worked in leadership, but we also brought in leaders from different like parts of the business and different parts of the history. So those that came from our legacy German counterpart or, company versus those that sit in the US, those that sit in Finland, made sure we had different like tenures. So it wasn't just new people in leadership making decisions, that it was people that had been in the companies for a long time. So it was not a huge committee, but at least we invited different teams into the decision making process to really get behind it. So that made it much smoother to align. And I think, to be honest, what I was experiencing when I came in was the company was like starving for some clarity, so to speak. So I think this was like, we're putting a stake in the ground. Even if it's a mistake, it's a stake in the ground. And people can get behind that. What people struggle with is ambiguity. So from that perspective, I think, it wasn't a big deal on the internal alignment. We had a lot of great momentum through that. And that has actually helped the external part of it because everyone's so amped up around it. And we've got people posting on LinkedIn and things like that. So I think that wasn't the biggest hurdle, so to speak, luckily.
Well, you just brought up the topic of momentum. Quick back on the study, but also on the growth concept. How do you, as a CMO, balance growth and momentum?
Yeah, it's, well, I don't know if you have to balance it. You need both. You
Yeah,
need momentum to power growth, right? And I think where you kind of lose momentum is, again, when you don't have clarity or you don't have trust from your teams to be carrying the message, or if you go quiet and you stop reiterating the message all the time because you might think you've said the same thing a million times. For someone, it might be the first time they're hearing it or remembering it or retaining it on the third time or the fourth time. So for us, it's about really consistent communication within the organization. We're remote first, which provides its other additional challenges in terms of how we keep people aligned, but also keep that momentum going. What has helped is just the pace of delivery from product. That's what we also promised as part of this transformation, if you will, and this rebrand, is that we're going to be shipping product more consistently and more often. And the product team, hats off, like they've been delivering to the point where people are like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up, which is, nice problem to have. But it shows that we're like putting our mouth where, like we're doing what we're saying. And that always helps keep momentum. And I mentioned we launched the MCP server. Like everyone is geeking out about it internally because it's just such a cool way of interfacing with the product and just like a ton of use cases that people want to share. So that's been really helpful. And I think like I just posted on LinkedIn about growth loops, right? So in a PLG motion, it's less about the funnel and more about the growth loops and how your outputs of different parts of the traditional funnel, if you will, become inputs to the top of it. So that needs to continue happening. And that momentum is so important, part of that, especially today. I think I heard the podcast with Elena Verna from Lovable, and she's just talking about how they're building in the open. They're fully aware it's hard for them to measure how word of mouth is working, but I think it's organic social is their biggest acquisition channel, and that's their big bet. And I think we're leaning into that pretty hard at Leadfeeder as well, since we're working with marketers in the B2B space. So that's something that we have a huge focus on from a momentum perspective in the org as well.
yeah. I mean, with everything we know currently about LLMs and how you show up in LLMs, organic social is a massive impact there as well, versus SEO, where that is ranked as a lower like kind of factor going into it. So at least in my personal opinion, I think that is also a big lever there to increase all of the AEO rankings, right?
Yep. I think I was at an event at LinkedIn about a month ago, and it's now like the biggest cited source for B2B LLM searches is their user generated content from LinkedIn. So it's a big part of the strategy.
Yeah. Definitely. So feeding off of that, just another growth loop that gets more and more important in AI adoption, which obviously also has a massive impact on how buyers buy these days, right? Making it so interestingly complex, dealing with a variety of different markets across worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the enemy of growth sometimes is trying to do everything at once, yet at the same time, it kind of feels like you need to these days, right? You can't just do one thing to grow. You can't just say, I want to grow this market. You can't just say, I want to, expand product because the barrier to entry in software these days is so low. You have to distinguish yourself differently. And for us, we're looking at growth lever as, these loops, these value loops that we could create, but also from word of mouth, kind of building in the open, similar model of what you see at Lovable. That's one of our big bets to do it. And we have people doing it in German. We have people doing it in English. So that's probably showing where we're going to show up. So I don't think we're going to get, a massive Southern European push right now, but you got to work with what you have because no one's budget is necessarily getting bigger these days either.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I think that is something in the market shifts. We all in marketing and certainly also on a commercial side can see, and that is also the trend that has been going. But I mean, there the market and the current like kind of algorithms play in well with that push for organic more so than in a way paid.
For sure. I mean, it's never free, right? It's resources. This takes time. This takes effort. We have it actually very structured at Leadfeeder in terms of what we call the creator program and how we work with our employees to share their knowledge and their insights on LinkedIn. We've built skills and for them in Claude to help them create the right content strategy. My director of demand, Jamie, works with the creators on a monthly basis on a check-in of what works well. He provides inspiration for types of posts and prompts and things like that. It has to be a focus. Like organic doesn't just happen
Yes.
from that perspective, right? So it's not because it's free. It still requires resource.
Absolutely. And as you just gave a small outlook on kind of the AI adoption in Leadfeeder
Mm-hmm.
internally, can you share a little bit how kind of because it is another like sign of what you practice, what you preach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are the levels how this plays out internally, and how have you enabled an AI positive culture?
Yeah, so we can't claim to be AI native, right? Like there's just no way in which Leadfeeder started 14 years ago. So we're trying to be AI centric. And what does that look like? So last quarter, we actually just kind of as a leadership team, we made an OKR around like we need to get much more intentional about how we are AI centric. We rolled out Claude Desktop to everyone in the company and have open AI office hours. We also at the same time did exercises all the way throughout the organization to mapping like what are the tasks that you do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And what AI maturity level are they at today? So are they, fully manual? Are they mostly manual with AI assist? Or are they AI driven, but, human intervention? Or are they fully automated or autonomous or, agentic? And it's also about, well, of those tasks, which one should be fully agentic and which one shouldn't be, right? It's like, I do not think that everything should just be AI for the sake of, running through AI. In fact, I have very strong opinions on that. But we did that exercise to help unlock like where can we actually see the efficiencies that we want to achieve. And I think marketing, my team seems to be one of the more advanced teams in the company and like has, found ways to it's not about saving time, it's about gaining time, right? Because I had my head of web and creative be like, oh, I saved like 33 hours last week with all the things I'm doing. I'm like, well, like how many hours a week were you working before? And so I was like, no, I think you gained 33 hours a week through this, through the different workflows that she had built to assist and help her team. So I think we've been very intentional about how we want AI to roll out throughout the company. what remains to be the challenge, I think this is for any organization, even if you're very strong in AI, is the maintenance of it, the kind of scaling of it, and making sure that people aren't just doing it for the sake of doing it. And this is where I get crazy, like thinking up of use cases for AI. I was like, that's not the objective. The objective
Right.
is you are a master of your trade. What are the things that you're doing that could be, faster or better or more efficient through the use of AI? Or what are we not getting to because we're behind on other things, is another way to look at it. So I think when I talk to people in B2B SaaS, we're probably at par with a lot of organizations. And then sometimes I talk to people, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're like way beyond what other companies are doing. So it's a spectrum out there.
It definitely is. Also, how it is getting pushed internally. But as you mentioned AI centricity, do you think that AI centricity and customer centricity always goes hand in hand?
No, I mean, it's probably almost at odds in some way. If you could, I guess you could argue it that way in terms of like humans want to talk to humans. You can't forget about the user. You can't forget about the customer voice in any of this. So I guess I rephrase it. They're not at odds, but I think the AI centricity is an operational thing, whereas a customer centricity thing is more of an ethos thing, and they can hopefully coexist.
Yeah. As you say, hopefully, but yeah, I mean that is an
Yeah.
interesting part in AI adoption, both internally, but of course also externally in all processes. How much of it is still serving the customer and increasing customer value versus actually going away from being customer centric.
Yeah. I mean, when you think of it under different use cases, I think about the classic support scenario. Like, yes, it's very efficient for the company to use AI bots to serve the customer. This is also nothing super new. Like, people have hated chat for a long time, right? Before it
Yes.
was even like super AI, it was just like boxed answers and decision trees and stuff like that. So that has been a time saver or an efficiency gain thing that companies have tried for many years. Hopefully, AI is actually getting smarter to the point where it's learning, and it actually might even be a level up from speaking with a CS person or a support person that has the kind of limitation of their knowledge, right? Of how much they've worked with customers. Whereas once you pool all that knowledge and AI learns from all of it, it's finding the edge cases from other colleagues and potentially, in theory, hopefully, able to give a better experience to the user as well.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned events in your like rebranding strategy, and of course also general demand generation strategy. So you have been to and Leadfeeder has been to lots of events. I've seen some of the different tactical levers you pulled for these online. But if you give a small like wrap up of the event season, what has been your biggest impact tactics you've used that you could see really pay off?
Yeah, I think it's not rocket science. The more you prepare, the better the outcomes are, right? So, getting your sales teams and the people attending the events activated in advance to drive the traffic, to drive the conversations at the booth or at the event is really important. Standing out, doing something unique. So, you mentioned some of the tactics, like I messaged Jamie like a week before the event. I'm like, we're going to need bright signal green glow sticks. Can you make that happen? Who doesn't love glow sticks? Like, just doing something different that not everyone else is doing. And we also talked about like how to do activation at the events where it's more about, playing a game, or like we gamified our event, our booth presence, if you will, and did one nice giveaway versus, just come get tchotchke crap. I've never subscribed to that. So those are some of the tactics that worked well. And I also really believe in having stage presence when we invest in them. I don't love pay to play. I try to avoid that. So coming back full loop to what we're trying to do from a thought leadership and a content and a share open, building in the open perspective, hopefully our voices are getting recognized in social channels and get invited to speak. We see that happening at different events. But there's still some pay to play scenarios, and then I'm just really like diligent about how is this not a product pitch, because people don't want to show up for a product pitch, and aligning to our brand as thought leaders versus just trying to sling software.
Yeah.
So that's been the strategy. And of course, we went out hard with the rebrand. Like, we needed to get out there. So still collecting all the learnings and understanding the ROI of the different individual events before we figure out completely and commit completely to our H2 events lineup,
Yeah.
if you will. Mhm.
Yeah. You just mentioned, building out in the open. To circle back on that, I had I had Michael Heiberg from Ocean.io on here, and he named transparency as one of the biggest growth levers. He has been preaching, and they have been like practicing. Do you experience something similar at Leadfeeder, but also, of course, the other companies you worked with?
Absolutely. I mean, definitely at Leadfeeder, maybe versus others, like we are super transparent as an organization. We have people on our leadership team that are like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a company share this level of detail with like the employees in terms of financial results and stuff like that. So transparency is in our DNA because we feel like it fosters trust, which, fosters momentum, all of the things that we've been talking about that are so important to the growth of the company. In particular, in marketing, it's very much about building the open because, well, one, we're selling to marketers now. Like we've made that kind of line in the sand that we want to be someone for the marketer. And we know that in today's world, like the democratization of like marketing and learnings and how people share is so important. We need to be the biggest dog fooding, dog champagning, whatever you want to call it, users of our platform. And what better way to do that than to share kind of what we learn as we go. So it's a mandate, and it's been my mandate to the team since I started, because I was like, we are the commercial team. We need to be using the product. We need to be sharing how we're using the product. Share our failures too. People love that. Like, don't step into this trap, right? So not just the rah stuff, but also, the learnings along the way.
Yeah. Definitely. And talking about learnings, both on like event season and bringing this under the umbrella of the rebrand, what have your biggest learnings been on leading a rebrand like that with a variety of markets and then carrying it out into an event strategy?
Yeah, it is coming down to how does the brand translate from everything you're doing internally and online? Because when you're doing a rebrand, it feels very digital, right? Like you're making a new website, you're making new assets and content and so forth. How does that translate into who we show up as people in events? And like we did work on our brand voice and our brand strategy, and there are very specific words that were chosen for it that needed to also come true to life when we show up at events. And this was me like being like, we said we want to be more human in our brand. Where are the humans on the booth? Like, why is it all product? Okay, let's have that conversation. Okay, product is how people recognize what we do. The human element is the people there, and we want them in certain outfits to make them memorable. So it's about having those discussions of how that brand strategy translates offline. Because in B2B, it tends to be very heavily online, right? And so we had a lot of discussions about, okay, we have these taglines, we have these kind of value words that we use in terms of our voice and our presence and so forth. How does that show up in person? So if we nailed it, I don't know. But I think, we at least were very intentional and had the discussions as much as we could. And like I said, we did the gamification. This was to draw people in and have conversations and not necessarily just whip out the laptop and show a demo. Like that's not what, I mean, to be fair, we did a lot of that at OMR because that's what the audience wanted.
Yeah.
Less so at Sassius, right? So you have to also adapt to the types of events that you're at.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, like both of those events, I mean, they are like large scale events.
Mhm.
And how do you decide to go for a large event concept rather than like, the more intimate small scale event concepts?
Well, it's both typically, but I think it also depends on your ICP and like where they show up and where they want to absorb information. You can do these elaborate dinners. I'm a big fan of dinners and small intimate events, but they tend to lean themselves to more like ABM type strategies where you're very specific on who you're inviting, and you might have more of an enterprise motion that works really well for, whereas we are more mid-market SMB, like we need more volume but not necessarily on the partner side. So we work with partners, and the partner strategy is much more the intimate kind of events, if you will. And so an event like Sassius kind of rides the both sides of it because it's not huge, but it's also not quote unquote intimate either. But there are a lot of potential partners at Sassius, whereas OMR is just massive, right? So that's being able to talk to anyone interested in marketing should know and about Leadfeeder kind of thing. So that's the balance that we need to strike.
How have you experienced the shift in buyer behavior when it comes to your go to market strategy? Like, how has it shaped how your go to market strategy is currently and has evolved?
Yeah. So it is about showing up in the dark funnel, right? Talking a lot about how we have this build in the open strategy. We're talking that we don't see all the signals right away. And when they land on the website, you're already being, you're not like in the discovery phase necessarily. You're already like being evaluated. And that's why it's, you know, once you get that traffic to the website, so important to understand who it is because they're further down the funnel than they've ever been before because they've heard about you in a Slack community or they've, searched an LLM and you came up. So that website signal, if you will, and intent is so much more important because it means that like it's now or never almost in so many ways. And I know this as a buyer myself that like, yeah, I am more influenced earlier on in my buying cycle, especially if I interact with a human, right? Like they help me form opinions and so forth. But I'm also like, I don't need any help. I'm going to do this all myself. So like, that's the balance. So if you can figure out who's already showing up and get into that conversation with them earlier, like you're much more likely to be successful in making them a client in the end. So we're working a lot, again, product pitching or somehow right now, but with our own product to understand who's showing up to the website, make sure that we activate our sales teams on those so that we can have the conversation with them before they raise their hand.
And what did you learn specifically about positioning throughout the rebranding and the website relaunch? And of course, also like on the events, as you say, like the thought leadership and the conversations you have had.
So part of the rebrand started with positioning, to be honest. So like it's more than, but very much includes the vision, mission, purpose work, right? It's actually like where it kind of starts because we knew we needed a new strategic narrative. And like we told a story to ourselves and we're like, this actually really resonates and it touches on a lot of the things that we already show up and do today and what we want to continue to build towards in the future. How does that then translate into, vision, mission, purpose work? So we did all of that kind of mishmash in one. We did our mission first because that's all like the easiest thing because it's what you already do. It's how you deliver today. And then we had to get like really intentional about purpose because it gets very political of like, is it why I show up to work every day? It's like, no, this is why Leadfeeder exists to serve who we serve in the world, right? It'd be great if it's also aligning with our employees of why they're showing up every day, and maybe some do. And we, for the first 3 months, left out vision just because it was already a lot. We were doing strategic narrative, we had new purpose and mission statements. But then we were like missing the ambition. Like, where are we going from a product perspective? Where do we want to go and think big? So we introduced vision after the launch, actually, because we felt like it was really important. So it's also about keeping pace with, what internally we can absorb, because if our internal company is unable to absorb it, I can promise you the market isn't. And not that the market needs to know our purpose statement, but they need to know what our position is in the market, right? So that starts with everyone internally knowing. And when we do customer interactions or we are at a conference, like we're all saying the same thing, we're all drumming the same beat. And that takes a lot of work. So, taglines are super helpful because they're memorable and people can then back into it. So we had a tagline from our strategic narrative that was signal over noise. And that's, both about that intent signal that shows up on the website amongst all of the noise in terms of like GTM these days, which is fully disrupted. But it also means like you can tell the bigger story of where Leadfeeder sits in a very busy MarTech stack, if you will. So super important to nail that. And it's never done. Like you need to keep positioning because new product comes out. How does it fit? How does it fit into the narrative? And hopefully it isn't that hard to make those leaps, but you need to continue to work with the teams to, it's not just like putting it on a internal company page on Notion and saying goodbye to it. It's making sure that it's something that we're living and breathing every day.
Yeah. And I mean that beautifully connects to the alignment talk, right? I mean, we already said like it's always top down. If leadership is aligned and is working towards alignment in one way or another, it's always gonna trickle down. But how do you, as a CMO, ensure that your team stays aligned internally, but also specifically working with product and sales?
Yeah, we're very intentional and we have probably, again, because we're remote, we have maybe more meetings than we want to, but it's important. And there may be bigger, more expensive meetings than ideal, but it's just so important to get the right people in on those meetings all the time just to ensure that that alignment continues to happen. We had one example of a product launch where PMM came up with a positioning statement and it went live on website, and it was just the way, like, the order of the words changed the meaning entirely, and product just like freaked out because it was like, it's not agentic. It is like, powered by agentic or so, whatever. I can't fully remember the example, but like it was an oh shit moment. And that meant like, okay, we need to get back to the basics of how we make sure that we avoid going live with something that product doesn't, but we're not just saying something that doesn't make sense. So we've, implemented more processes and things to make sure that we stay aligned, and we've taught Claude a lot of things so that it's just not spitting out hallucinations and things like that. Cause I think that gets super messy and super risky when you get lazy and stop having original thought. And, oh, that sounds cool. Like AI is great at making zippy sentences. And then sometimes you're like, well, what does that actually mean? So it's not just alignment between sales and marketing and products. It's also alignment with your AI tools.
Definitely. Actually, I have discovered the best way to get to know someone this day and time is to speak to them about their AI, both how
Yeah.
their AI reacts and how they react to the AI. I think that's something we can all relate to. First of all, fantastic stories, but there is this element of we all have a certain way to communicate with our AI, and AI has a certain way to give back to us what we need, right? In an ideal case scenario.
Yes. I think I've noticed that like Claude is less cheerleady than ChatGPT for some reason, which I'm like, cool, we're business at Claude. Claude's business time. And when I need a emotional pick me up, I can go talk to ChatGPT if I need to.
Or even worse, Gemini. I find Gemini to be the most cheerleading.
Okay. I don't, I've only used Gemini's for image stuff, actually. I haven't used it a ton for general prompting.
Yeah, I think at least from a personal viewpoint, Claude and ChatGPT are definitely better on output. But yeah,
Yeah. But ChatGPT has learned that I know you like me to challenge you because I told him, like, you have to challenge me. You can't just tell me I'm right
exactly.
all the time.
Yes,
I will challenge you on this. Okay. Thank you.
yes. I think that is one of my most used in prompts, and challenge me on this and this specific point, or challenge it all together. But like, give me input on this, and
Yeah.
give me the questions that or yeah, bring my own challenge a bit further than
Yeah. Yeah. Pretend you're the other person. How would you be picking this apart? Or, yeah,
yes.
exactly.
But that brings us back to your point of like, outcome is always better the more prepared you are. And it's AI is a great tool in that, in both actually being able to increase quality of output, because we all have seen that it can scale output and provide more quantity. But I mean, the more you adopt AI and get into it, the more it can actually also elevate quality.
Yeah. You have to just continually feed it, right? And give it context and, update it. And, like, it's a maintenance thing as much as it is just, a daily use tool. It's keeping it up to date and yeah, making sure that the context is always there.
Yeah, and I mean that's so in the entire tech stack, right? I mean, it works like that with any other tool a company adopt or a team adopts as well. So I mean, AI kind of in that way needs to be thought into it as well. It's yeah, yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Do you find that bringing back to the events? Do you find that AI ready companies are generally also better equipped to get more out of their event strategy?
That's a good question. I guess, like, you're talking about like AI native companies or
No, AI ready companies. So companies that
okay.
show like the high degree of AI adoption.
Yeah, I think on text or in theory, yes, because it means that they're able to apply tactics that help them get prepared more efficiently and, walk into an event with potentially a unique angle with plenty of preparation because, they're not sitting in spreadsheets manually kind of looking at things. So I think that they're probably much more apt to have successful events from that perspective because then they can focus on the human part more while they're there versus like updating like CRM or whatever it is that the manual processes would dictate. So I think that there's potential. I think Leadfeeder is a pretty AI forward company, and we certainly used it to some extent for our event preparation. But there was still stuff we were doing manually. To be honest, just can't run away from some of it. Spreadsheets still exist.
Yes. I mean, they have the use cases as well, right? At least for now. Probably in the future we will see something else when it comes to that. But I think also in the future there will always be a certain executional part or manual part that needs to be involved. But I think from my perspective, looking at the best way to use AI, I mean, it is like kind of this interconnecting process between what a human does and what you let AI do, right? And the manual parts are parts of that as well.
Yeah. I mean, we let AI build the game that we had at our booths, right? Like, so we definitely were using AI to help us, be more successful.
Yeah. But would you say there is a connection between company maturity and the event ROI they reach?
In some ways, I think company maturity is more so like how long have they been doing events and what is their buyer persona? How well are they able to, translate that into experiences? I think something a company that's been around for a long time that has an advantage and it still understands is the value of human connection because it has always been there and it's always been that way in a traditional sense. Whereas where you come in from a more like we need to be super efficient because everything is AI and we're a 5-person company, we're doing 100 million in ARR. It's like, okay, but like how can you run a proper event strategy where you think about the experience and connect with people if you only have 5 people on your team, for example? So I think there's probably pros and cons to being a more established, if you will, company that's running an event strategy because you've seen it all before, you've experienced it, you've made your learnings, you know how to make it successful. An AI kind of native company firm, the other angle might have some smarter, newer ideas that haven't been tested before, but at the same time don't necessarily have the experience.
Yeah. But that's where the like it can go both ways, right? At least me being or having been a lot of like startups and scale ups, testing events can show a massive ROI because you are like doing like you have first mover advantage at least internally and testing this new way to establish that and also paving the way from going from purely digital or purely sales led to also like kind of more marketing led human interaction.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's qualitative data testing that you can do right on the floor, so to speak. That marketers are also just more equipped for. We're built for optimization. We're built for kind of collecting data points, even if they're qualitative in nature. Versus sales is on the phone trying to just sell, right? And they're not necessarily always that great at listening, even though they know they need to. And marketing as being kind of natural born communicators, we're really good at like proliferating the learnings throughout the organization when we get back, right? Whereas sales is like my job is to close a deal, and marketing is like our job is everything, but not least of which is to bring the learnings and help product understand how things are landing. Or hey, PMMs, you weren't at the event, but like this messaging, like it rocked or it didn't, or these kind of things. Like we're very good at that as well. We should be, and I think that we are.
Yes, I think I always found that, and I said this early on in this podcast, but that is one of these points or can be friction points, but if done well, is actually this beautiful collaboration point between sales and marketing. Because in marketing, as you say, we are the natural born communicators, but we most of the times we sit with the data, we look at the quantity, right? We don't have the tough sales conversations every day. So, if done right, it's a beautiful point to bring these two perspectives together that work really well hand in hand. But of course, like with being more data based, we of course in that way have a less involved job because we're not the personal carriers of the message.
We should be though, right? Like in so many ways, like we can't just hide behind our analytics and data and so forth. And events are great ways to do it. I always send marketing, even if they're like, okay, why should marketing be there? I was like, marketing should know how to sell a product. Like they should be out there fully able to do a demo of the product, and having this customer voice should be super important to marketing to understand. So I'm a huge believer in like shadowing calls and talking to the customer. Whenever I start a new company, I do customer calls. I am an executive sponsor on a number of accounts here. So like I'm on all of their calls if it's a renewal call or a support call, these kind of things. Marketing needs to understand the customer voice just as much as sales or CS does.
Yeah, I think maybe that was also a point for me where it started like collaborating really closely with sales, but talking to BDRs and SDRs on an ongoing basis has been one of the biggest learnings of that shaped my tasks, the priorities on what needs to be like back then on a campaign level, but what actually needs to be focused on right now. Where do we need more strategy? Where do we need more focus on this? Because yeah, this is where you learn what works and what doesn't, but also actually where the first points where you can see disconnects happening early on.
Exactly. They have their finger on the pulse, right? So like if they're good BDRs or SDRs, they're using the messaging that they're being given, and then they're understanding very quickly how it's being received. And they understand seasonality or trends that are happening. They're doing tons of monitoring because they don't like doing, spray and pray. Like they want to understand that they're reaching out to the right accounts at the right time. So they're watching different, feeds on X or whatever it might be for their particular business. And that collaboration becomes so important between sales and marketing so that they have the materials or the talking scripts that they need in order to do that. But then marketing also gets the knowledge they need for air cover at the same time from a campaign perspective.
So, I mean, sales and marketing alignment. I mean, lead feeders. It's right there with the intent data your
Hmm.
platform provides. So,
Yeah.
on that perspective, who do you think should own that data? Who should be in charge and also advocating internally?
Yeah, I think marketing sits at the orchestration of it because it lands on the website. The website is the marketer's glasses to the world, right? And I think that, maybe in some organizations they could sit with sales op or rev ops or something like that, but then marketing still should be involved because we just talked about how important those signals are also for the marketer, building retargeting lists, all of the things. But I do think it sits best with marketing to be the orchestrator of it and show the value and kind of bringing the use cases to the commercial teams of here, this is what this intent or signal tells you, like run with it, and making sure that it does actually run is probably the next hurdle to kind of achieve. But personally, I think it sits with marketing best, but we have plenty of customers where it sits with sales or it sits with rev ops. Like at the end of the day, it just matters that people are acting on it. And so it's about who has the muscle to make sure that it actually gets into the right hands and gets activated the right way. And marketers, again, if you have, we're used to building workflows in our CRMs and nurture campaigns and so forth. And with Leadfeeder, you can create kind of work N8N type workflows. This is okay. This account comes to the website, does XYZ things. It's this ICP fit. Therefore, it needs to ping, this rep who owns it. Like that can all be automated, right? And marketing can own that, and also get the insight of like, great, my campaigns are actually working, sending ICP traffic in, which is so valuable when we're all struggling for justifying our spend and ROI.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, it is looking at the lead feeder target profiles you mentioned before. I mean, in the SMB segment, I mean, I would assume that, and from what I've seen, I mean, marketing is still also with a big part of the sales enablement, right? So driving more of the action that comes with receiving that kind of signals and ensuring that sales also translates them into their specific sales strategy in the right way and in a meaningful way.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. So I think it kind of doesn't necessarily matter what size your company is. I think it's still marketing at the end of the day, to your point, that sits with that enablement, sits with that trigger point and again, natural communicate, all of the things, right? And sales wants more leads. Great. I can't make it rain from the heavens with form submissions all the time, but here's insight into what's going on. And I need you to pick up the phone and do some heavy lifting here. But here's everything you need to know is a much better partnership than here's a list we bought of our ICP. Go at it. Like that's never going to work. Don't think I haven't been asked. I think we need to buy an email list. Okay. No, not at Leadfeeder. I shouldn't say that. I did not get asked this at Leadfeeder. This is a previous walks of life.
Very relevant to point that out. And then, yeah, slowly wrapping up, Frenemies is about the gap between growth and reality. We touched upon it already a little bit, but where do you see the biggest gap between growth and reality right now?
Well, I think it's more about expectation setting in that, yeah, in the ideal world, we'd be growing everyone at 40% or 100%. Like you see the lovables of the world and all these things. Guess what? There's plenty of software organizations out there that are like scraping by at 5 to 15% growth year on year. And that's completely normal right now because the industries like the software is just so disrupted at the moment. So I see that there's a lot of gap in expectations of what, growth should be and what reality is showing up. Buyer journeys are more complex, they have more options. They're like the biggest kind of thing you lose too often is indecision. It's not because they go and choose a competitor, it's because they're like, I can't wrap my head around this because I've got inundated with so much information out there. I have no idea which tool is going to actually solve my problem. So I think growth is getting increasingly difficult. And so there's just this kind of misunderstanding like, oh, just slap some AI on it and you guys are going to be gangbusters from, private investors or boardrooms. It's like, no, let me just break down reality for you. And that's offers a really nice opportunity for sales and marketing to align together on it, because if you can actually put the data behind it and show like what's happening, then you're an aligned front, right? It's not because marketing is not delivering enough leads or sales isn't doing the right follow-up. It's just the nature of the market right now that we need to align to the modern buying journey and understand that everyone's budgets are being cut. Like indecision is real. Like there's a lot of factors that make growth very difficult these days. We can't all be
Definitely.
lovable.
No, we would if we could. But I personally find that AI actually has increased indecision and has heavily impacted it as well. What is your viewpoint on that?
Like how AI has increased the gap between growth and reality.
No,
Sorry.
that there is even more indecision than there was before.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it comes back to what I just keep calling noise, right? Like it's like it's like analysis paralysis. You know it yourself sometimes as a marketer. You go down too deep a rabbit hole and you come out and you're like, well, what the hell did I don't even know. Like, I did not get the answer to what I was looking for. And I found 15 other things to go out and look at. And that's what AI can also really do for a buyer, right? So it becomes this paralysis that means there's less out there to get because people just don't know how to make decisions.
Yeah, very fair point. This is where we're leaving it for
Okay.
today. So, what I'm taking with me today is, well, of course, the AI adoption study and Denmark leading the pack with more equipped buyers, but also way more noise out there in the market. And of course, your tactics you've proven to work to cut through it. And of course, the everlasting wish to cut through the noise and focus more
Yes.
on the signal.
Yes. Do you want to join our marketing team before we do that? Yes. All of the things.
Fantastic. Well, it was a pleasure having you on, Jillian.
Thanks for having me.